a shadowy communist agency is responsible for infiltrating free societies, and Hong Kong is losing the fight. Welcome to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. Joining me today is Dr. Sonny Lo, an author, professor, and political commentator. Thanks for joining me.
My pleasure.
So, one of your areas of expertise is the United Front work in Hong Kong. What is the United Front?
The United Front was originally the strategy of the Chinese Communist Party to cooperate with the Nationalist Party in China during the early 1920s and later during the 1930s to fight against the Japanese, so that both sides can form a kind of alliance to deal with the Second World War. The United Front work later on has evolved into an instrument used by the Chinese Communist Party to win the hearts and minds of the people. And in the context of Hong Kong, United Front means that the Chinese government has to do everything in order to win the hearts and minds of the Hong Kong people.
So what are some of the goals of the United Front? Who are they targeting in Hong Kong?
The goals of United Front is to, number one, to win the political support of the ordinary people. And secondly, to get the support of the Hong Kong people who would support not only the local government of Hong Kong, but also the central government in Beijing. And thirdly, United Front work aims to prevent the local Democrats from grabbing more seats in the legislature and also the district councils, because in the minds of Beijing, if the political opposition in Hong Kong can get into political power, then the situation in Hong Kong would be tipped in favor of the opposition rather than Beijing.
So basically the goal is to make Hong Kong less autonomous and more in line with the Communist Party's goals.
In the minds of Beijing, United Front work can coexist with the autonomy of Hong Kong. Because in the minds of Beijing, if United Front work is successful, then the pro-Beijing forces would garner sufficient public support and capture most of the seats in the legislature.
So how does the United Front infiltrate Hong Kong society?
The United Front work infiltrates into Hong Kong society by using many interest groups like women, like labor unions, or like district federations, or even like neighborhood associations. Many of these interest groups were formerly pro-British before 1997, but after 1997, most of these interest groups have turned to Beijing, mainly because of political loyalty and also because of financial incentives, because Beijing has dished out a lot of financial and monetary incentives to all these leaders of the interest groups. And most importantly, the leaders of the interest groups have been appointed to the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference, the Chinese National People's Congress. So in terms of status, influence, and power, those co-opted Hong Kong elites, they feel that they are more politically powerful than ever before.
Is it just special interest groups, or is the United Front involved in the education, business sector?
United Front work also evolves deeply in the business sector because many business people are highly pragmatic. They want to do business with China. They don't want to antagonize China. So the business sector is particularly vulnerable. The least vulnerable sector in Hong Kong, or to put it in another way, the most resistant sector to United Front work is the education. Because in the education sectors, many intellectuals, academics, students, they are highly post-materialistic, if you like. In other words, they attach importance to values like human rights, democracy, sustainable development, civil liberties, and they are less interested in material incentives. So from this perspective, the education sector is the least vulnerable to United Front work.
Well, I'm curious, you talked about the business sector. How can you tell the difference between United Front work and just organic natural exchanges between mainland China and Hong Kong?
The organic exchanges between mainland China and Hong Kong involves some more formalistic levels of exchange, like, for example, business associations interacting with Chinese government departments. But for United Front work, it can proceed from formal to more informal cooptation. That is to say, they try to make friends with you, and in the process of making friends, they try to woo your side to support their side politically. Mm-hmm. So gradually, the co-opted targets become their friends and even the solid supporters. So it is a kind of a long-term movement to win friendship, to change friendship to political loyalty.
Now, when we're talking about the United Front is actually a division of the Chinese Communist Party itself, correct?
The United Front department within the Chinese Communist Party is mainly responsible for United Front work. Mm-hmm. However, many other Chinese departments are also dealing with United Front work. For example, in the case of Hong Kong, we have the liaison office, which is the representative office of the central government in Hong Kong. And it is also responsible for United Front work. And quite often, when the mainland Chinese government departments come to visit Hong Kong, they may interact with some of the business associations in Hong Kong. And quite often, United Front work is defined broadly. That is to say, to win friendship, to interact with potential friends, and then to gain their political and economic support in the long run. So United Front work in China is not conducted solely by the United Front department. It can be conducted by many other departments as well.
So it's sort of like a whole of society method of subverting and changing a society to be in line with the Communist Party of China.
Yeah, we can describe it as a kind of mechanism in which various Chinese departments are engaging with their opposite numbers so as to win the hearts and minds of the targeted people, targeted interest groups, and targeted organizations.
So how successful has United Front work been in Hong Kong?
Actually, United Front work has been quite successful in Hong Kong, particularly since 2012, when the anti-national education campaign was launched by many young parents and also students as well as intellectuals. However, the September to December Occupy Central movement in 2014 constituted a strong resistance to United Front work in China. Many young people in Hong Kong, together with intellectuals, they were determined to push for democratization by using the Occupy Central movement in 2014. It failed, and so United Front work in China has deepened further until this year, when the government of Hong Kong, led by Carrie decided to introduce an extradition bill, and that extradition bill alienated many young Hong Kong people as well as ordinary people, because many people were frightened that such extradition bill would probably lead to the possibility that many Hong Kong people would be transferred from Hong Kong to mainland China. So United Front work has its limitations. The limitation is that with the education sector being very resistant to United Front work, the extradition bill has failed to win the hearts and minds of the ordinary people.
So what is it about the education sector that makes United Front work not work?
The education sector is characterized by very independent-minded intellectuals whose understanding of China is not really through ideological indoctrination or even socialization, unlike the mainland Chinese intellectuals and students who were educated in the mainland, who were socialized and indoctrinated to combine the cultural identity with the political identity of accepting the CCP rule in the mainland. In Hong Kong, traditionally the colonial rulers were very loose in educating Hong Kong people, not to mention about Chinese nationalism. So in Hong Kong, traditionally and historically, the education system did not inculcate strong patriotic sentiment in the psyche of many young people. And after 1997, this perhaps semi-colonial education legacy persists. Not only that, with the era of globalization, many young Hong Kong people understand China not through the textbook, but through the internet. So in that sense, the education sector in Hong Kong is highly autonomous.
So how does the United Front respond to things like the umbrella movement or the extradition bill protests, much of which is student-led, student and teacher-led?
The United Front machinery responds to the umbrella movement by resuscitating or reorganizing the youth groups in Hong Kong. They try to organize many pro-Beijing youth groups to support mainland's policy towards Hong Kong, such as the recent Greater Bay Area plan, in which young people of Hong Kong are encouraged to do business in China, to work in China, and even to reside in China. However, the opposition to the extradition bill has dealt a severe blow to China's United Front work in Hong Kong, because many young people are proven to be very resistant to the idea of political and economic integration between Hong Kong and mainland China.
Now, I know the United Front is very active in countries around the world. How does the United Front work in Hong Kong tie into United Front work globally?
United Front work in Hong Kong cannot be easily translated into foreign countries for several reasons. Number one, in other foreign countries, there are many overseas Chinese who have long been assimilated into the mainstream society of these countries. So they are not so vulnerable to United Front work. Secondly, United Front work conducted by China tends to focus on the individuals, like the individuals politicians or the individuals who tend to have emotional attachment to China. So in other words, United Front work in Hong Kong is one thing. United Front work conducted by China in foreign countries remains a relatively underdeveloped and under-researched topic, which is a fascinating one.
So with elections coming, what chances do the pro-democratic factions have against the United Front?
Because of the protests of almost 1 million to 2 million people against the extradition bill, we can safely anticipate that in the upcoming November district council elections, the localists and the Democrats will have a strong political comeback. However, whether the government of officials, including the electoral officials responsible for elections, whether they allow some localists to run in the elections remains to be seen, and it will probably become a controversial issue because some localists advocate the idea of, quote, self-determination, end of quote, which is legally and politically unacceptable to both Beijing and the Hong Kong authorities.
So there's going to be an effort to make sure pro-Beijing forces win the...
There will be such a thrust to ensure that candidates who are, relatively pro-Beijing, who support the basic law and also the SAR government will be allowed to run in the election. However, the localists who are now anti-government, anti-China, they may face the possibility of being disallowed to run in the election. So this will possibly be a bone of contention.
So with United Front active around the world, why should other countries like the United States care about what's happening in Hong Kong?
Countries like United States can care about Hong Kong because Hong Kong can be regarded as a semi-democracy. Hong Kong doesn't really look like a democracy as with the West, but Hong Kong has a pluralistic society. We also have civil liberties combined with the rule of law. Hong Kong is a good indicator of how China may democratize in the long run. So in that sense, Hong Kong is extremely important to the West because Hong Kong's existing civil liberties and also pluralistic system belong to the universal values shared by many Western democratic countries. In that sense, Hong Kong's situation deserves to be observed.
So Hong Kong can show an example of how China could become more democratic, but could it also show the world the ways in which the Chinese Communist Party undermines democratic institutions?
In a sense, yes, because the extent to which China penetrates and infiltrates into the semi-democracy of Hong Kong can illustrate that kind of erosion of autonomy.
Do you think the U.S. should be concerned about United Front work in general?
Well, many foreign countries are actually concerned about United Front work conducted by China in general because of the perception of the China threat. Many countries like United States, Australia, New Zealand, they have been highly concerned about United Front work conducted by China in their countries. To that extent, I think United Front work can be regarded as a potential threat to the national security of these countries. In particular, if United Front work involves, say, provision of donation to politicians in America, Australia, or New Zealand, and that donation may be orchestrated by pro-Beijing groups and individuals. And in this scenario, there may be a possibility of violating the domestic law of foreign countries, just like the case of Australia. So United Front work sometimes can trespass or step into the boundaries or the red bottom line of the foreign countries.
So what is the future of United Front work after these extradition protests?
I think after the extradition protests, United Front work has to resuscitate, reorganize, rearrange in such a way as to win the hearts and minds of the people of Hong Kong. In the short run, China's United Front work in Hong Kong will encounter tremendous obstacles. I don't think that United Front work conducted by China will really be easy in Hong Kong, mainly because many Hong Kong people, they tend to treasure their civil liberties, they tend to have their post-materialist values, and they tend to be less materialistic. In mainland China, many citizens are encouraged to adopt a materialistic attitude towards society and economy, and exactly because of this focus and emphasis on materialism, mainland China doesn't have significant inroads towards political liberalization and political democratization. Hong Kong is very different. Hong Kong traditionally has a very strong liberal-minded society. In that sense, I anticipate that United Front work conducted by China in Hong Kong will still encounter tremendous obstacles from now to the year 2047.
When the one country, two system policy ends.
Yeah, and we can expect that with such strong opposition to China's United Front work, one country, two system will likely continue. And mainly because one country, two system was originally designed by Deng Xiaoping to appeal to Taiwan for reunification. Given the fact that one country, two system has become so turbulent and problematic, and given the fact that Taiwan is unwilling to accept the one country, two system easily, we can boldly anticipate that Beijing may prolong the idea of one country, two system so as to appeal to Taiwan for reunification, so as to buy time for Taiwan to consider or reconsider this one country, two systems.
And I imagine the United Front is very active in Taiwan as well.
Yeah, United Front work is also trying to penetrate into Taiwan, but Taiwan has very strong local Taiwan identity. And that kind of resistance to United Front work is even stronger than the case of Hong Kong. So we can see this interesting tug of war between Taipei and Beijing in the coming years.
So if somebody wanted to learn more about you or the United Front, where should they go? What should they do?
I think to learn more from United Front work, they can assess China's policy not only towards Hong Kong but also towards Taiwan. And secondly, outside observers have to understand and assess whether China's policy in Hong Kong and Taiwan are opposed by the local people. And that kind of opposition and resistance can be regarded as good indicators of the extent to which United Front work can work or cannot work.
Mm-hmm. And you have an upcoming book, is that right?
Yes, my book on China's new United Front work in Hong Kong will be published soon.
That's the name of the book?
Yes.
All right. We'll keep an eye out for that.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me today. It was a pleasure to hear about the United Front.
Thank you.